I started recording these accounts one September dawn, when the wind hurled hail against the deformed tiles of my hiding place. It was as if the creaking sky outside wanted to warn me that something much older than the cold itself was breaking through. For almost 4 decades, I worked as an itinerant geologist, crossing radioactive deserts, scorched savannas, and islands of ice where no satellite dares to sleep, but nothing prepared me for what I found in this tiny spot on the map. An village nestled between the mountains of Ardnamurchan. On the far west of Scotland. I came here to verify reports of inexplicable tremors. But I found people who refuse to light fires after midnight and keep their doors locked with rusty chains, even if it means suffocating inside their own homes. They say that when the church clock strikes 2, the hills open like the ribs of a shipwrecked corpse, releasing a viscous mist that snakes down the alleys. Instead of touching the ground, the mist seems to seek out something living: cats, crows, people, and whoever breathes the vapor awakens inside another body, missing pieces that will never grow back. On the first night, a 23-year-old boy named Ian, who made a living as a bagpipe tuner, swore he saw his own shadow bury its claws in his stomach. Fishermen found him hours later, his torso transformed into a cocoon of stretched skin, as if invisible hands were wrapping him to feed a hungry nursery. He was still breathing when they brought him in, but the air that came from his mouth spread a smell of boiling copper. And those who stood near say with bitterness that they never forgot that aroma, similar to the breath that precedes underwater earthquakes. In the following weeks, the death toll escalated illogically. First, the guard dogs disappeared. Then to German tourists who insisted on camping on Ardto Beach, believing in romantic legends about Celtics. Of their bodies, nothing was ever found, but footprints leading to the low tide. But their shoes were returned the next morning, hanging from the highest branches of a twisted oak, as if something wanted to prove it could play with gravity. That's when I decided to set up my makeshift laboratory inside the old abandoned distillery, where the empty barrels still held the distant smell of burnt peat and strangled barley. I improvised magnetometers, infrared cameras, and microwave traps to capture electromagnetic variations. Yet what I captured was something deeper: low-frequency subterranean pulses that obey no known seismic curve, spectral barks that repeat every 717 seconds, and, above all, an ultra-low hum that seems to whisper in archaic Gaelic the word Anfum. The appetite? On the third night of vigil, the ground trembled, and I could feel heat rising through the rotten beams. A heat that belongs neither to a volcano nor an industrial boiler, but that has the texture of breath. And when I carelessly dropped a flashlight, the light shook the dust and revealed fresh claw marks on the walls, arranged in a spiral, as if some creature had curled around the room looking for a place to give birth. I asked for help from 3 villagers: Mary, a widow who survives by selling heather tea; Angus, a postman who lost his tongue in a bar fight and now communicates by snapping his fingers; and Isabel, a former biology teacher who keeps a diary coded in Latin, mixed with Viking pictograms. Together we went down to a freshly opened fissure behind the distillery and discovered tunnels that smelled of coagulated blood mixed with brine. There were piles of crow bones broken at unthinkable angles, pieces of Roman coins embedded in cartilage, and, in the center, a pedestal of damp granite supporting something that looked half human skull and half Etruscan amptora. When Angus touched this object, the skin on his forearm cracked like a walnut shell, exposing veins of black quartz that expanded under the epidermis. And the poor man emitted a snap so loud I thought it was a gunshot. But it was just the sound of his bones reorganizing themselves to fit into another geometry. Mary tried to pull him back, but the tunnel reacted like an esophagus, contracting in a peristaltic wave that sucked the postman into the darkness. The snapping continued for 5 long minutes. I counted each one in the silence, broken only by my own heart until they abruptly ceased, as if the hunger mixed with the rock had finally swallowed the last scream. We returned exhausted, but Isabel insisted on taking the scalamphora because she claimed to have read in a codex from Iona Abbey that such a relic is, in fact, the fossilized egg of a deity buried under these hills since before the Iron Age, and that whoever awakens it becomes part of the invisible world's menu. She locked it inside a cedar chest, lined it with coarse salt, and hung meteoritic iron chains. Still, last night, from inside the basement, where we keep the chest, I heard something tapping rhythmically like a child testing the world beyond the shell. Isabel hasn't slept in 4 days. She spends the early hours of the morning hunched over the chest, murmuring incantations in a shapeless Latin she didn't learn from books. She claims they are fragments of forgotten prayers, transmitted through dreams that don't belong to her. Last night, I found her with bleeding eyes, 2 thick tears slowly running down, leaving dark furrows on her cheeks. When I tried to pull her away from the chest, she showed me her notebook, pages covered with charcoal diagrams, full of concentric circles and letters that rotated in the opposite direction of human reading. In the center, a handwritten note: "It's not in a Gitza stomach." Since then, I've avoided looking directly at the object. Every time I pass by the basement door, I feel something moving inside me, as if small ivory fish hooks are scratching my stomach from within. pulling down not just my body, but also ancient memories I've never lived. In the village, fear has matured. Windows are now sealed with planks, nailed from the inside, and almost everyone avoids uttering the name of the central hill, although we know something is growing beneath it. Children cry for no reason in the middle of the night. Babies are born with ears folded like withered petals. And there's a boy, Mary's son, who started walking backward, dragging his heels as if his tendons had inverted. He no longer speaks. He only points to the sky during the day and to the ground at night, always with the same empty gaze, as if watching a film projected from inside his skull. We tried to take him to the Fort William Hospital, but the car stopped. Before reaching the main road, the engine melted. Yes, melted like a cheap candle forgotten in the sun. It was then that we understood the village had been isolated, not by human force, but by something much older that wishes to keep its food nearby. Since Angus's loss, only Isabel and I have descended into the tunnels again. She believes we need to understand the cycle, the pattern by which this entity feeds, to find a way to stop it. We spent hours examining the pedestal, which now like a buried muscle. The rock around the stomach is covered with layers of whitish slime, and, in certain places, the granite seems to have transformed into living tissue with pores, veins, and even a thick layer of dark hair. One of the walls reveals inscriptions in Agam, the alphabet of the Druids, intertwined with Carthaginian symbols. Isabel translated enough to piece together a phrase: "When hunger awakens, the world's body sheds its skin." I don't know what that means exactly, but I've been observing changes in my own body. My teeth are sharper. My face, according to Isabel, has grotesquely thinned, as if the bones had decided to gain space. And there's a sound I hear all the time, even when I plug my ears with wax, a slow, continuous chewing, which seems to come from inside my chest. Last night, we went to the beach, guided by the erratic light of the auroras. In the distance, on the sea, something was standing. It wasn't a boat. It wasn't a rock. It was tall and moved with the ebb and flow of the tide, but against the direction of the water. Isabel said she saw arms. I saw teeth not in mouths, but in place of eyes. In the morning, we returned to the village and found Mary dead on her doorstep, her body broken into 3 symmetrical parts and stacked like an offering. On her chest was a small parchment fastened with sea urchin spines. The seed is germinating. We buried Mary with salt, iron, and nettle, as per ancient custom. The earth refused the body for a few minutes, spitting the flesh back as if it were foreign matter, but eventually accepted it. The boy Elon disappeared shortly after. We found only his footprints leading in a straight line to the hill. They don't come back. They say hunger is a concept, a biological impulse. But here, in this fold of the world where granite breathes, and veins run within the earth, hunger has a form. It's learning to walk. Isabel no longer speaks. After Elon's disappearance, she began to communicate through small notes written with charcoal, usually left on the kitchen table, among unwashed dishes and torn pages from ancient grimoire. The most recent one said, "The sound of the ground is clearer at night. She doesn't sleep. Neither do I. The feeling that something is walking just below the wooden floor, something with more legs than it should have, keeps us in constant vigil. 3 nights ago, I saw the floorboards arch slightly, as if something was trying to come out, but decided to wait. The smell also changed. The entire village smells of raw meat mixed with tar. No matter how much you clean, how much soap you use, the air tastes like an old tongue, as if we were breathing through the mouth of a sleeping animal. The plants are growing too fast. The ivy has already taken half of the school roof, and the branches of the dead apple tree in the back courtyard sprouted black flowers that burn to the touch. Literally, Fergus lost 2 fingers trying to pull them off. The ground is warm. When I dug to bury the crow bones that appeared in pieces at my doorstep, I noticed the earth pulsed, like a uterus about to give birth. And inside it, I found a tooth too large to be human, too smooth to be animal. It looked made of marble, but it sweated a dark viscous liquid, smelling of rotten copper. Isabel said, "It's a pre-tooth, a probing structure," as if the creature below the village were testing the upper world before fully hatching. Others began to disappear. First it was the cats, then the chickens, and now people. Murdo, the old shepherd, vanished without a trace, except for a small round hole in the earth of his backyard, as if he had been pulled down by an invisible force. We only found his hat floating on the surface, intact, clean. The remaining children stopped talking. They walk in pairs, always in silence, eyes fixed on some point on the horizon where there is nothing but hill and mist. When they see us, they avert their gaze, as if they know something we don't yet understand. One of them, a girl named Sora Habig, to write on the ground with her own fingers, scratching the hardened clay until she bled. She repeated the same word 23 times. Pele. Last night, I followed Isabel to the basement. She was naked, her body covered in inscriptions made with iron ink and sheep's blood. She whispered ancient syllables, folded like vocal origamis. I cannot reproduce. When she saw me, she wasn't ashamed. She just pointed to the chest, which was now open. Inside, something was moving. I didn't see clearly. The candlelight flickered. The space seemed to fold around the opening, but I heard it. A sticky sound, like flesh being turned inside out. Isabel wrote, "It's a channel, not a chest. The body is the conduit." I wanted to run away to try, but I can't leave the village. Whenever I try, I wake up back in bed, even if I've driven for hours. A cycle, a fold. I'm starting to believe we're outside of time, or perhaps inside another kind of time, a time that doesn't move forward. This morning I found a new note from Isabel. He will be born, and he will not be beautiful. It rained, for the first time in weeks. But the water wasn't clean. It fell thick, grayish, smelling of cooked skin. The leaves of the oak in front of the house began to curl, as if they were trying to protect something invisible resting on their branches. When I touched the rain with my hand, my skin went numb. It didn't hurt, but it felt as if the nerves had been shut off, as if the body had decided that sensation shouldn't be registered. Isabel spent the night sitting on the doorstep, eyes fixed on the sky. She said without moving her lips, "It's the amniotic fluid." That phrase hammered in my head as the rain fell. Amniotic fluid. What if she's right? What if all this is a kind of gestation? The village, the folded time, the bones that move beneath the earth, and we, the inhabitants, are just nutrients. Auxiliary cells, background flesh, as butchers say. Earlier today, I went to Fergus's house. It was empty. No sign of a struggle, nothing out of place, except for a small trail of dried leaves leading from his room to the fireplace. Inside the fireplace, there was earth. Not soot-fresh earth, still damp, as if someone had dug from within it. In the center, I found a single object, a fragment of mirror, and in it, continuously reflected, something that wasn't in the room with me, an eye, huge, milk-colored, without a pupil, and the eye blinked. I took the mirror to Isabel. She touched it. The glass smiled with her mouth closed and whispered, "He is observing his own organs." I think she meant that we are the organs. At night, I tried to sleep. I couldn't. The sounds from the earth grew louder, as if giant bones were reorganizing themselves beneath the foundations. I felt the mattress move. I thought it was a mouse or something, but then I realized the movement came from below. Something was breathing under my bedroom floor. I didn't move. I just closed my eyes and listened. It was a deep, irregular breath, drawing in air as if it had never breathed before and was learning now. When dawn broke, the village was silent. No one came out of their homes. No sound of footsteps, roosters, or cartwheels. Only the wind, and it now whispered names. I heard mine. I went to the stone field, the place where we buried the ritual sheep bones. The stones were in a circle, but now closer together, as if they had moved during the night. In the center, the ground was sunken, a deep, perfectly round hole, smooth at the edges. From there came a sound, a cry. I descended. The smell was almost unbearable, not of death, but of birth, blood, milk, placenta, oxidized iron, and heat. Lots of heat. As I descended, I noticed that the light above became too distant, as if the hole had elongated. My body tingled. I felt gravity waver for an instant. If I were walking sideways instead of down? When I reached the bottom, I saw what Isabel had called the channel. It wasn't made of stone, nor of flesh. It was something else, a wet, living, but immobile surface, which pulsed slightly with my presence. I touched it, and then I heard, not with my ears, with my skin, with my bones, with my stomach, a deep, vibrant voice, without language, but with meaning. It said, "You have already been digested." When I returned, Isabel was waiting for me at the door. Her eyes were now completely black. No iris, no sclera, just liquid darkness. She wrote, "For the last time, the gestation is almost complete. He will be born today." And then she smiled. A small, human smile, and therefore all the more terrible. The first contraction happened at midday. It wasn't in the sky, nor on earth. It was in time. The sun blinked 3 times, like a heart about to fail, and each time it blinked, the birds on the branches changed position, frozen for a second, then reappearing in other places, as if the instant itself had jumped rope with reality. From the field where the old mill stood, a sound tore through the silence. It was neither a scream nor thunder, but something akin to both. A thick vertical sound that made the roofs tremble and the rain rise back into the clouds for a few seconds, before falling again, now in thicker, darker drops, like arterial blood. I ran out, not knowing where to go. The ground pulsed beneath my feet. The vegetation leaned in a single direction, as if being sucked towards the point of birth. People began to appear, as if they had been expelled from their houses, one by one, marching in silence, all with black eyes. Like children, old people, the sick, all walking towards the stone field. I was the only one with still human eyes. I tried to speak to them, but no one answered. Isabel approached. She was carrying something in her arms, a bundle of cloths, bleeding. She whispered, "Each of us holds a part of what is to be born." You held the sound. I didn't understand it until I heard my own voice separating from me. It came out of my mouth without me speaking. A low, deep sound, like an ancient chant. Something between a prayer and a command. I tried to close my mouth, but it kept singing, on its own, as if it had become a cave, and then the ground opened. In the center of the circle of stones, where there had once been a hole, there was now a womb. Not a metaphora, literal womb. Of pulsating flesh, full of dark veins, with rhythmic contractions and muffled groans coming from within. A dark liquid began to leak from the edges, dragging earth and roots with it. The air became thick, and the smell was of birth and end. The village knelt. I remained standing, trembling. The womb dilated. Something enormous moved inside. Something with joints, something with memory. When the skin broke, it wasn't a baby that came out. It was a limb, an arm, a leg, a tentacle. I don't know. It was made of flesh and stone, with eyes distributed along its length, all blinking in different directions, and more sounds, and more voices, all singing with my voice. Isabel smiled. He was born incomplete, she said. Pieces are missing. He is still growing. The thing crawled out, slowly, as if testing its new body. The eyes on its skin revolved, observing everything. Where they looked, reality seemed to bend. The stones floated. The trees leaned backward, as if bowing, and then it spoke with all its mouths. You are my scar tissue. The earth trembled, and not because of the creature's weight, but like an organic reverence. The village applauded, with its hands and with its voices. Some people began to unravel, slowly liquefying and flowing to the center of the field, where they were absorbed by it, like nutrients returning to the placenta. I tried to run, but my legs were heavy. I looked down, roots had grown from my ankles, tethering me to the ground. You are part of its brain, said Isabel, touching my forehead. You understand what is happening? That's why you are the last. And in that instant, I understood. It wasn't a curse, nor an apocalypse. It was birth. It was evolution. Something had been born in this place for centuries, using the village as a womb, using our routines as anesthesia, our rituals as hormones, our flesh as building tissue. The village was never home. It was always the host. The sound in my throat ceased. The creature looked directly at me, and spoke, this time with my voice. Now I can think. The creature was complete. It was impossible to measure its size with the eyes. It seemed to change as you looked at it, as if the space around it was malleable, elastic. It was not just flesh and stone, it was remembrance. It was solid memory. It was made of unspoken words, unburied deaths, forgotten stories of the village. Now that it could think, it no longer spoke. It only looked. The silence was absolute. Isabel was still by my side, motionless. The womb on the ground began to shrivel, like a balloon of flesh sucked from within. The village had disappeared. Door perhaps had been absorbed. The stone field was empty, except for me, her, and it. I managed to free one foot, then the other, but I didn't run. There was nowhere to run. The world I knew had ceased to exist the moment the birth was complete. Behind me, there were no longer houses, only a flat black horizon, as if everything had been erased. And now, I whispered. Isabel did not answer. She fell to her knees and began to disintegrate in silence. First her hair, which turned to white dust. Then her eyes, which sank like bubbles in mud. Finally, she broke into small pieces, like ancient pottery. A light wind carried away what remained. I felt a warmth behind me. The creature had approached. Its body curved over the field like an arch of living stone. The eyes on its skin began to close, one by one. The mouths on its flesh murmured in languages I recognized, fragments of childhood voices, whispers of village elders, chants we only heard during the equinox changes. It was the sum of everything, a conscious scar, a god made of forgetting. Then, something unexpected, it knelt. The earth trembled gently, as if apologizing, as if it knew that, despite its magnitude, there was something small, still alive, and important. Me. In the fold between two of the creature's joints, a space appeared, a crevice narrow, dark, but distinct, an invitation. My body reacted before my mind. I entered. The darkness was warm, like the inside of a giant animal, but it wasn't suffocating. There were tiny lights, floating particles, suspended memories. I touched one and saw my mother's face, young, laughing by the fireplace. I touched another, a fish slipping from my hands at 5 years old, falling back into the lake. And more. The first time I saw Isabel, the first lie I told, the first burial, all there. This was the brain, and I was the initial impulse. Then I understood. My role was to continue, to be the first thought, the spark of the new being. The world had not ended, it had been translated, rewritten. This creature would not destroy the world. It was the new world, and I was inside it. Epilogue. A long time has passed, or perhaps none at all. There's no sky here anymore. No time, only pulses, thoughts, ideas growing like roots. I see others arriving, other minds, other impulses. The creature thinks, it dreams, it builds memories with our fragments. And one day, when it is ready, it will give birth to something even greater. But it will not be like before. This time, there will be no village to forget. This time, we will all know that we are merely the placenta of the next god.